The league and the players meet in back-to-back days, trying to reach an agreement and end this lockout and hopefully start spring training on time. The players and the league met in New York on Monday and Tuesday. We're going to talk about what was in the players' proposals and what the league had to say about it. And also, how about this? Kevin Gausman says that the Giants never made him an offer. So we're gonna get into all of that, and also some Hall of Fame talk. Results are gonna be in today. So all of that next on today's Locked On Giants.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily San Francisco Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Giants, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Ben Kaspick, and on this show we provide episodes 3 days a week for now, talking about the San Francisco Giants in a way that's data-driven and rational, but also simple, passionate, and accessible to all. I'm a former contributor for the baseball statistics and analysis websites Beyond the Box Score and Rotographs. I've been podcasting about the Giants since 2015, and I'm a lifelong fan. Thank you for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. We're free and available on all platforms, including YouTube, so please check us out there if you have not already. And as I said, coming up on today's show, first and foremost, I want to talk about the MLB Players Association and the league meeting on Monday. What went down? What did the players propose? This was a counter proposal to the league's proposal that had been the previous Thursday. Was that last Thursday or 2 Thursdays ago? Regardless, it wasn't that long ago. The league made a proposal, players didn't like it, and then Monday was the counter proposal. And they met in person for the first time since the lockout began, and they also met again the next day, today on Tuesday. So we're going to talk about what went down, talk about Kevin Gausman and his comments that the Giants never made him an offer, and then some Hall of Fame stuff. So a lot to get into. Let's just jump right in to what the players proposed. Now, there were a couple of major concessions that came out when we heard about what they proposed on Monday. The first being that the MLBPA dropped the whole get to free agency sooner thing. Right now, you need 6 years of service time to reach free agency, and the players had proposed that you would get to, it was a little bit confusing. It had something to do with if you reached a certain age, then you would reach free agency after 5 years. But they've dropped that. They've put it back to just the standard 6. And so that, that's a big deal that they're dropping something, because we can kind of cross it off the list, and their focus has narrowed. Now, another major concession that they made was that it had to do with revenue sharing. Initially, they were talking about cutting revenue sharing by around $100 million. And in this latest proposal, they proposed cutting it in the $30 million range relative to the last collective bargaining agreement. So that's a major change from $100 million cut to $30 million cut. And so, the perception should be that the players made a couple of major concessions here. And the question I have is, will the league make some concessions in their next counter proposal? But what did the players ask for if these were the concessions that they made? I think kind of the big thing is that they're holding firm on their push for 2-year arbitration eligibility. Right now, players reach arbitration after 3 years of service. There is an exception for the top 22% of players in terms of service. Those players are dubbed Super 2 players, and they reach arbitration after 2 years of service time instead of 3. But the players want all players to reach arbitration after 2 years. So the league has said that they're not going to touch this issue, which, come on, nothing should be, you can't just take stuff off the table just because you don't want to change it. So I don't blame the players at all. And the league has also said they're not going to touch revenue sharing. So that's the fact that the players made a concession there is significant. Now, another change that kind of, I think, came out today that we heard about was that the players have proposed bumping the league minimum salary to $775,000 believe it's about 600,000 right now. And they've also proposed the institution of an eight-team draft lottery and a $245 million base luxury tax threshold. Right now it's about, I think it's 210 exactly right now. And all three of these issues have been known goals of the players in past proposals, and the setting of the CBT threshold is expected to be of particular importance to the Players Association. In recent offers, the league has pushed for tax thresholds in the $214 to $220 million range. So there's a big difference there. That is a very modest proposed increase by the league, given that it's currently $210 million. But clearly they're willing to give a little bit in that area. I would expect that they ultimately settle somewhere in between, and that it would be considered a win for the players to get a substantial increase. But to me, the thing I'm watching is the 2-year arbitration eligibility. I think that would be a major get for the players, and it may end up being the main kind of sticking point in these negotiations. I think that the players should and possibly will hold out for that, and so we'll see what comes of that. But even though the league came away from this, apparently it was kind of a heated meeting on Monday, but the fact that they're meeting in person, we're still in January, I think is a good sign. And the fact that they met on back-to-back days is a good sign, despite the fact that they're going to come away from this looking to spin it in the media. Both sides are going to do this, but I just hope they continue to meet and that the league prepares a counterproposal that gives a little bit. They can't just keep counterproposing the exact same thing that they initially proposed, especially when the players have shown a willingness to give a little bit on issues that they have asked for in past proposals. So anyway, that's kind of the quick and dirty update on that. So coming up next, we're going to talk about these Kevin Gausman statements saying the Giants never made him an offer. So what does that mean? Why would that possibly be? So we'll talk about that in just a minute. But first, it's the new year. So that means New Year's resolutions. If yours is about getting fit or eating healthier, make sure you include Built Bar in your plan. Built Bar is the protein bar that tastes like a candy bar, maybe even better than a candy bar. Built Bar makes it easy to stick to your resolution. It tastes so good you'll want to eat it, unlike other protein bars which can be chalky, waxy, or taste like a chemical spill. You want to eat healthy, but it just gets so boring. By about week 3, certainly by January 25th, you might be thinking, this just isn't worth it. Where is the chocolate? Well, Built Bars are covered in 100% real chocolate, and they come in with a healthy profile, so you can eat them guilt-free. Talking about in the typical bar, 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, to go along with a crazy 17 grams of protein. So go to BuiltBar.com and use promo code LOCKED15 and you'll get 15% off your next order. Use promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at BuiltBar.com. All right, as promised, we are going to talk about these Kevin Gausman statements. He went on Twitter and felt the need to clear the air a little bit about the Giants and whether or not they had made him an offer. And he says that they did not. And so it's very interesting. I mean, I don't know that anyone was even talking about this. So it kind of caught me off guard to hear these comments. We'll talk about what exactly he said. Thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. We're free and available on all platforms. So, of course, when there was a baseball offseason that wasn't just about the lockout, Kevin Gausman's free agency was a hot topic around here. I'm kind of surprised. I don't want to say like happily surprised or anything like that, but a lot of fans seem to understand why the Giants didn't get into a bidding war for Kevin Gausman. I think typically, certainly before they went out and won 107 games and Farhan Zaidi and company kind of proved to fans that they know what they're doing, this would have not been taken as well. When Madison Bumgarner, I think a lot of fans also understood Madison Bumgarner. We're going to tie this Gausman statements in with Bumgarner's free agency. But there was a lot of negativity at that time. So I don't know if this ticks people off or not to hear Gausman say that the Giants never made him an offer. But Gausman said, quote, "I want to set the record straight for y'all because there has been a lot of BS out there about this. SF never made me an offer. Simple as that." Let's see. Let me just pull up. Simple as that. Anyone or anything that says otherwise is hashtag fake news. So, yeah, I mean, what to make of this? First of all, what has been the BS out there about this? I don't know what exactly he's referring to. I hope Giants fans haven't been going around saying that he's disloyal to the Giants for signing with the Blue Jays. I certainly never thought that, nor have I said that. But of course, there's a lot of fans out there, and people. I'm sure there's been some of that, right? And professional athletes and their Twitter accounts. He's kind of active on Twitter. He probably has seen a lot of that, but I don't know if he's talking about fans or if he's talking about in the media. I honestly have no idea. But to say that SF never made me an offer, let's break that down. How can that possibly be? Because he was such a good player for the Giants in his 2 seasons here that you would think they would want him back. But the way I've not rationalized, but the way I understand this, the way I think how I think this could possibly make sense is that the Giants knew what he was likely to command. The Giants knew what his representation was seeking. And so if, his representation is coming to the Giants saying, look, we have interest from other teams in the range of north of $90 million, and we're seeking a 5-year deal. We're seeking to get the most guaranteed money possible. My client, Kevin Gausman, believes that this is his last big chance. He wants this to be his last big splash into free agency. He doesn't want to sign, a shorter term deal and then re-enter the market again. He just wants to cash in and get the top dollar amount possible. So if you're the Giants and you don't feel comfortable in general giving starting pitchers, or relievers for that matter as well, let's say north of 3-year deals, then your offer is not going to be competitive or what they want, what the client Gausman wants. Let's say the Giants felt like they could go 3 years, roughly $75 million, maybe a little less than that, but 3 years, or even 2 years, like $60 million. Who knows exactly? But they weren't going to go 5 years. And if you're not going to do that, and the representation has said this is what they're seeking, it kind of makes sense not to make a formal offer that is just going to be declined. And so that's kind of the way that I can rationalize. I don't want to say rationalize because I'm not searching for an explanation. I do really believe that's kind of how this type of thing would play out. But right, because of course, at a certain dollar amount, they would want Kevin Gausman back. It's not like we just don't want Kevin Gausman, period, so we're not going to make him an offer. It has to be that they knew that their offer wasn't going to be competitive with what he was likely to get elsewhere. And, it's also possible that they had a sense that if Gausman wasn't able to get what he wanted, then his agent would come back around to the Giants and be like, okay, look, we're willing to go shorter term. What would you have in mind? So I don't think this is negligence. I don't think it's just they hate Kevin Gausman or anything like that. I think he was looking for the maximum dollar amount possible, and he got it. 5 years, 110 is a very good, life-changing amount of money for Kevin Gausman. And he is 31 years old already, so this is going to pay him through his age 35 season, right? 31, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it's probably not going to end so well. It's a rare pitcher indeed who is able to be worth that kind of money through their age 35 season. It does happen. I look at Max Scherzer as an example, but this is one we'll have to continue to watch. I have talked at some length on this show about If we look back at MLB Trade Rumors lists of the top pitchers from years past, if I go back 5 years, the top pitchers, according to MLB Trade Rumors, free agent pitchers, because they rank them every year, 5 years ago, so 2021 would have been the completion of that 5-year deal had they gotten one at the time. The top pitcher was Jeremy Hellickson. Next was Ivan Nova, then Rich Hill, then Jason Hamill, then Andrew Kashner. Okay, these are all guys you would have made a big mistake had you given them a 5-year deal. Only Rich Hill, I believe, was still even pitching in 2021. And then the next year, the top 5 were Yu Darvish. So these guys would still have a year left on their deal if they got a 5-year deal. Yu Darvish, who's still good but kind of inconsistent right now. Jake Arrieta, who was good at the time but completely fell apart. Masahiro Tanaka, who's back in Japan. Lance Lynn, who's become really good. And then Alex Cobb, who's kind of reinvented himself last year and now signs a deal with the Giants, ironically. And then the year after that, so these guys would have 2 years left on their deals. Patrick Corbin, his stock just has completely fallen after a couple of declining years in Washington, and it's a big reason why the Nationals have kind of entered a downturn here. Dallas Keuchel, same thing. Nathan Eovaldi kind of reinvented himself and become good again. Jay Happ and Yusei Kikuchi. So, and then the last year, so these guys would have, 3 or 4 years left on their deal. Garrett Cole, Steven Strasburg, who immediately got hurt. Zach Wheeler, that would have been a good signing. Madison Bumgarner, who immediately fell off a cliff. And Hyunjin Ryu, who's already starting to show some decline in Toronto. So, yeah, I mean, I understand. There's a lot of data to back up that pitchers on long-term deals rarely work out. And then add that to the fact that there was some red flags with Kevin Gausman in the second half of the season. So I think fans understand this for the most part. I loved Kevin Gausman as a person, as a player. His time here was fantastic, but 5 years down the road, it could definitely look like a contract that a team would come to regret. I'm glad he got his money, but I also understand where the Giants are coming from. But the fact is, the Giants didn't make him an offer. I take him at his word. Why would he lie about this? So take it for what it is. I understand it. I wanted them to bring him back, but also 5 years for a starter. There's just a lot of data to support the idea that those don't work out so well. And also the Giants probably have a lot of belief in themselves to be able to find the next Kevin Gausman, to turn an Alex Cobb into a very productive pitcher who's making $10 million a year over 2 years versus Gausman making $22 million a year over 5 years. So I'm sure they have their reasons. Anyway, coming up next, let's talk about the Hall of Fame. Those results are going to be in today. It's Barry Bonds' last year of eligibility. So we're going to get into that. Jeff Kent, Tim Lincecum, also important players on this year's ballot. So stay tuned for that. But first, BetOnline would like to wish you a happy new betting year as we continue our march through the playoffs and beyond. BetOnline remains the #1 spot for all the sports wagering action for 2022. New year and a new updated desktop and mobile website. To sign up today and receive a 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit using our promo code LOCKEDON, one word, to get started. From football, basketball, hockey, boxing, and UFC, right to your favorite Vegas casino games, and of course baseball once that gets back up and running, and we will be talking about potential betting opportunities when those come up. Don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers available for 2022. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to wager on all your favorite sports. BetOnline is where the game starts. All right, here we go. We're going to talk about the Hall of Fame. The results are coming out today at 3 p.m. And so it's telling a little bit, and maybe I'm an exception, maybe I'm not, that I haven't talked about the Hall of Fame almost at all in the many years that I've been podcasting, and in the 3 years I've been doing Locked On Giants here on the Locked On Podcast Network. The Hall of Fame has kind of lost me because the greatest player of my generation growing up is not getting in. And so how does that make any sense? I think if you're a Giants fan, you've got to be jaded by this process. And today is the final straw, right? Today, Barry Bonds is likely to not get in again. I mean, he's likely to not be voted in again. And there's going to be a lot of reaction to that. I think the national media is going to react to that. A lot of people obviously don't like Barry Bonds. I think here we're very different than the national media when it comes to Barry Bonds. So last year, Bonds was named on 61.8% of the ballots, and you need 75% to get in. It is possible that there is a late push because the writers know that this is the last year of eligibility for Bonds. It's also possible the opposite happens. The people who haven't voted for him are just going to dig in, as always, and say, we're going to cross the finish line here and not get this guy into the Hall of Fame. I think it's noteworthy that we do have a majority voting for Bonds, so I don't want to get too upset about this. 75% is a high bar to cross. There are a lot of voters. I actually don't have it pulled up here, but if memory serves, there's hundreds of voters, right? There's like 500 voters or something. And so, yeah, Barry Bonds is likely not to get in, so I don't want anyone to get their hopes up. But also on the ballot is Jeff Kent, who has 2 years of eligibility left, including this year, and his highest was 32.4%. He has seen an increase in recent years. From the last 3 years, he went from 18.1% to 27.5% to 32.4%. So going up, but to get from those numbers up to 75 in 2 more years, very, very unlikely. So Bonds and Kent, both unlikely to get in. And I mean, how does that make you feel as a Giants fan? And then also today, Tim Lincecum finds himself on the ballot for the first time. And I just have to say, Tim Lincecum, very unlikely to ever get into the Hall of Fame. There is a case to make because if you're one of these voters who votes on a player's peak, there was nobody who had a higher peak than Tim Lincecum. Okay, sure, there are some players who have a higher peak, but he was the best pitcher in the game, as evidenced by the fact that he won back-to-back Cy Young Awards in 2008 and 2009. So extremely high peak, but extremely fast fall from that peak. But the thing I'm going to be watching for, and I think a lot of people are going to be watching for, is does he get to 5%? Because you need to get to 5% to remain on the ballot. And so if Tim Lincecum falls off the ballot after 1 year, I think that would also be a shame. And so the whole Hall of Fame thing, I just, it's not that I'm angry or bitter. It's almost that I don't care because of rules like this. They changed the eligibility from 15 years to 10 years pretty clearly in an effort to get guys like Bonds and Clemens and Schilling off the ballot sooner and to get rid of the steroid era guys sooner. And, you know, there's a whole argument that I agree with that there's people who have done just as bad, if not worse things than what Barry Bonds allegedly did, and they're in the Hall of Fame. We cannot know for certain who was using, who wasn't from this era. So personally, I would definitely vote for Bonds if I had a vote, but I do not, and that's just the way it is. So we'll see. I wouldn't get my hopes up about Bonds or Kent or Lincecum today, but the results will be in at 3 p.m. Pacific time, and tomorrow we're going to talk all about it. So please come back for that. We are a daily show most of the year, and for now we're just 3 days a week. But at some point, probably when the lockout ends, we'll get back to being 5 days a week. Thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. Now make your second listen Locked On Bets, your daily one-stop shop for all your gambling needs. Locked On Bets, hosted by your boy Q, with expert analysis and insight from Lee Sterling. It's free and available on all platforms. Once again, my name is Ben Kaspick. Check me out on Twitter at Ben Kaspick, Kaspick. If you like this show, please consider rating it or leaving a review. It helps me out tremendously. So thank you in advance, and thank you to everyone who's done so already. I can't wait to be with you again tomorrow. Thanks again for listening. Stay Locked On Giants.